Now, our next guest, Peter Mandelson, was alongside Tony Blair and Gordon Brown, one of the architects of New Labour, which was, of course, one of the most electorally successful eras of, well, any party, but his party in particular. He famously once said he was intensely relaxed about people getting filthy rich, although he did sort of walk it back slightly years later. Well, I'm very looking forward to speaking to him to try and find out about how he thinks Labour should react to Friday's tax cuts, and does he think Keir Starmer is ready to be Prime Minister? Good to have you on the programme this morning, Mr Mandelson.
Nice
it feels slightly churlish to be...
Sophie, I'm afraid you didn't complete my quote. I talked about it's fine for people to become rich as long as they pay their taxes, a rather important qualification which you left out.
Absolutely, I completely take your point on that. Are you relaxed about the bankers' bonus cap then, just quickly before we start the rest of the interview?
I don't really have strong views on the bankers' bonus cap either way, frankly. I don't think it's a priority for us in getting the economy growing again. I mean, what I feel about the Chancellor's package on Friday is that it will take some time to see how reckless a gamble it may well turn out to be through higher inflation, higher borrowing costs for companies, higher interest rates for mortgage holders. So let's see how this pans out. But I do believe that what Labour's got to do is not concentrate on all the noise surrounding what Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng are doing. They've got to concentrate on their own agenda, setting out their own plan for growth. And I'm very pleased that they've started to do that at the conference in Liverpool today.
Yeah, it's interesting you're talking about Labour's plan for growth, because in June you made a speech saying that Labour should focus on raising the UK's long-term growth rate. It feels, since you made that speech, that Liz Truss has done everything she can to try and occupy that space. Do you think, I guess, Labour's been a bit slow out the blocks on this?
I don't think Liz Truss is doing that. I think she is certainly taking the country off in a radical direction, but I don't think it's the right direction, because at the same time as these measures that we heard about on Friday, the government is also closing down all the machinery relating to the development and exploitation of Britain's brilliant science and technology base in this country. You know, she's closed down the Cabinet Committee, the national machinery for bringing government and business together to exploit the new technologies. She's closed down the Office of Science and Technology Strategy in the Cabinet Office. This is the wrong thing to do. What we've got to do, as Ed Miliband was saying before, is invest very heavily and primarily through private sector investment in the technology-based new industries and markets and employment that are emerging now in our economy. And that private investment depends on economic stability, regulatory certainty, cheap borrowing costs, but also a very strong partnership between government and business. And I'm glad that the Shadow Business Secretary, Johnny Reynolds, is publishing a document tomorrow precisely on that subject, how government can work hand in hand with the private sector to bring about that much-needed investment in the whole spate of technology-based new industries that are emerging, at the heart of which is the green energy transition.
You're talking about the green energy transition. You've just said that Labour's commitment to spending £28 billion for 10 years on climate change. You were talking about in this speech saying just announcing a massive spend and a big policy goal does not in itself deliver economic growth. Do you still have those concerns, or do you think you're getting a bit more meat on the bone now?
Oh, we're getting much more meat on the bone. I mean, look. The whole point is this, Sophie, if I can just make it very simply and clearly. Government and business, public investment and private investment together, needs to invest in these new technology-based industries and markets that are emerging, not just from the green transition, but the whole diffusion of digital technology and the emerging critical technologies like artificial intelligence and the use of data across the economy and society. But here's the point. We've got to translate those great transitions that are taking place into the creation of UK industry, UK-based supply chains and UK-based employment, rather than seeing that massive expenditure leaking out of our economy and going off to benefit our neighbouring economies. And I'm very pleased that the plans that are going to be set out this week, both by Rachel Reeves, Ed Miliband and Johnny Reynolds, are going to set out that industrial policy which needs to support this very large-scale public and private investment.
Now, you, of course, are parts of the most successful Labour team ever in terms of election success, the famous, of course, 1997 landslide under Tony Blair. And you've been pretty critical of where Labour's been since. You said that Labour needs a complete break from the last 10 years of failure under Ed Miliband and Jeremy Corbyn, also describing Ed Miliband, this was in 2021, as a flop and a complete failure. Has that complete break happened?
I don't remember describing Ed Miliband in that way, but I'm sure your researchers will be able to furnish you with the facts. Look, here's the point about Friday, and it offers both an opportunity and a challenge for Labour. The opportunity is that in tearing off in the direction they've chosen, the Conservatives are forfeiting their reputation for sound money and fiscal discipline. That's been a very hard-won electoral weapon that they've created and deployed since Mrs. Thatcher's time. And they've thrown that away in the measures they announced on Friday. But here's the challenge for Labour. In responding to what Liz Truss is doing, is taking the Conservative Party back into its own sort of ideological right-wing comfort zone, as we saw them doing on Friday. Labour's response should not be to retreat into its own comfort zone of tax and spend and big state and the policies that we associate with Jeremy Corbyn. You know, the public have got to know, and they've got to be reminded every day from here to polling day, that Jeremy Corbyn and his supporters and all they stood for are behind us, and that it's now completely safe to vote for Labour again, that we've got sensible, middle ground, practical, affordable policies which are going to bring about that economic transformation and that structural change in our economy that we need in order to sustain economic growth in the long term.
Do you think Labour would now win the next election?
I do actually believe that what we are seeing emerging in the country is a sort of shift in public opinion. I think we are seeing a potential sea change in attitudes in the public about what the public wants and what the public won't put up with. But here's the point. Liz Truss, in effect, and the Conservatives, in their effect, are taking their own policy direction off the centre ground, the middle ground of British politics. Now, that creates an opportunity for Labour to occupy that centre ground. That's where the swathe of voters exist in the country who are going to determine the outcome of the next election. And they are focused both on economic competence and fairness and social justice. Those are two sides of the coin, the policy coin, the political coin, that the broad mass of voters right across the centre ground of British politics are focused on. That's what they want to vote for, and that's what Labour needs to offer.
Thank you. We are out of time, but just quickly, do you speak much to Keir Starmer, offer him any advice?
I do speak to him from time to time, yes, and members of his team. But I don't do for him and for them what I did for Tony Blair and Gordon Brown and before them Neil Kinnock. But whenever they want any help, you know, my door, my phone's there for them to call. But You know, they've chosen their course. They want to do their own thing. I perfectly well understand that. And actually, I strongly support the course they're taking. And I support Keir Starmer because I think he's a hard-working, public-spirited, patriotic leader for this country. The Prime Minister that I think overwhelmingly now the public are moving towards and deciding that they want to see in number 10.
OK, thank you very much indeed, Lord
Pleasure.
Mandelson there.